Right.
Last time I spoke to you, I on interview, like on video,
Right.
I talked about the pendulum swinging back, and that the right is going to have to understand their positioning themselves to be exactly what was happening to them for years, and they're going to go happily into oppressing over the left, thinking that, you know, it is our time for revenge, even though it may not be a conscious revenge. But I can't stress it enough to guard yourself, and as I am becoming more and more of a Christian, I would say guard yourself in that. But to those who aren't Christian, I would just say guard yourself in some type of reconciliation and understanding that more than 90% of the American people have been mentally manipulated and abused for years.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromist. This is Byrne Power, coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia. At least at the moment I am recording this. I'm doing this before I take my trip to Prague for 3 weeks to get some interesting business done related to puppetry. But it's time for another interview with my good friend Ashley, the digital hermit in Alaska. And it's been a few months since we last talked, and it just seemed like a good time to bring him back. And he does have some rather interesting information and some interesting possibilities. He's considering something. I'll let him tell it in the course of the dialogue. So, without any further ado, Ashley, how are you doing?
Greetings. Can you hear me?
All right, can you hear me?
Now I do. Can you hear me?
Okay, I had to click all the buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I like that lamp.
What, the one hanging there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice one. This room comes with two. There's one right there as well.
Oh, right on.
Right.
Yeah, they have the style
and a third one in the next room. So
they have a style and look of a candle, but they're electric.
Yeah.
I did the best I could with the lighting, Byrne. I moved myself all over the house. This is as good as I got.
Looks swell. It's great. So I figure what we'll do is we'll just talk about, whatever, and talk about also some of what you're thinking about the future of your own living situation. But if you want to talk really personally, what we'll do is we'll end the recording at a certain point, and then we'll just keep talking.
Yeah, well, I have nothing I'm ashamed of or to hide, but
yeah,
I also don't want to sit here and talk on things that, aren't really going to be fruitful for what your purpose is. You know what I mean?
Well, one thing I'm doing is that I've recorded one conversation. I look to record 2 or 3 more. I'm warehousing them for when I go to Prague for 3 weeks.
Cool.
And so I'm going to release maybe 1 or 2 a week during that time. And that way I don't feel under pressure to produce anything. And how wonderful that is. For some reason, I've got myself on a schedule where close to every Sunday I've been producing something. I did come up with something this week, and it actually might be out. I don't know what time it is. But unfortunately, I'm doing a video called What Makes Music Great, or Great Music. And unfortunately, I got hit by a serious copyright thing. This happens. But what happens is on some kinds of copyright issues, YouTube puts you in a 48-hour copyright jail. I think this is to give the copyright owners a chance to either really complain or who cares. So and then after that, it's fine. And that's where I am right now in the copyright jail. I think it's supposed to be released any moment now. But by the time anyone's watching this, this will have been long resolved. And I will either have produced a shortened version that does not include the song by Pacific Gas and Electric called Are You Ready? Or the full thing will go through. I think the full thing will go through, so I'm not really worried about it. But yes. So how have you been? Is it pretty snowy there?
Yeah. Actually, it warmed up. And so the standing snow in my yard is only about 3 to 4 feet deep, depending on where you are. So it's really, really melted down.
Right. For my European viewers, that's over 1 meter tall. And or rather, shall I say, for everyone who's not an American citizen, I think the English still use their imperial system on all sorts of things. They'll talk about millimeters and stuff, and then suddenly it'll be like we're going 2 miles down the road. So it is their system. So,
well, like here in America, we actually changed the whole system in the 70s, and then nobody ever adopted it.
Right.
We switched over to kilometers and stuff, and nobody ever did anything with it.
Yeah, and there's all these things. Well, it's kind of like we do get liters of Coke, 2 liters of Coke. The scientists all use liters, but when it comes to constructing a house, right now I'm thinking about. You'll notice I extended my red wall here, and when it comes to carpentry and such, I'm sitting here struggling with what the heck is a millimeter and a centimeter and a meter. I mean, I know a meter's about a yard, but it's like I'm used to the 1 by 10.
Yeah.
And what does that even mean in meters? And here's the real problem. What are their board cuts like? I go down and I go, here's a 2 by 4. We all know it's not really a 2 by 4, that it's been shaped.
Yeah, it's a 1 and 3. It's a 1 and 5/8.
And I've got the millimeters per that, but what if they don't actually cut them the same way? What if they're, a little bit thicker, a little bit wider, a little bit shorter? So I just had to invent what I thought, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I'm going with a friend on Friday just to have lumber cut for me. And I'm just hoping I can get in the ballpark to build shelves that'll be on this side of the house, and there'll be 3 1 meter each, over 9 foot tall shelves. And that's to cover all my stuff that's here right now. The stuff that I just keep accumulating. But anyway, but you had like a huge snowfall like about a week ago or so.
Byrne, I'll tell you, days, I don't really ever know what day it is or how many days. I mean,
where was it up to you?
What's that?
How much digging did you have to do?
Well, it wasn't so bad the last couple snowfalls. I mean, I think maybe about foot almost.
Right.
But we got a real big rain in soon after that.
Yeah.
But before that, the wind was the thing. Like I woke up at like 4:30 in the morning one morning to go out to the outhouse, and the wind drifts were so deep, I had to dig as deep as my belly button. I'm 6 feet tall.
Right.
All around the outhouse just to open the door.
Right.
You know. Yeah. So it's things. But you know.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about what's been going on with me, like I'm not scared to share.
No, don't worry about it. So, but we'll talk, we'll ease our way into other stuff.
Okay.
I think what a lot of people think is if you live in a really snowy place like, Southeast Alaska, that you're just going to see lots of snow all the time. And what they don't understand, it's actually, to me, the worst part is then it warms up, rains, the ground becomes, all this snow becomes super saturated. If you didn't clear out your snow prior to that moment, it's horrifying trying to move wet snow,
On Christmas Day, I went walking down the peninsula here, and the roads were that thick of just a sheet of ice.
Yeah.
And it was like ice skating on the road in your rubber boots. I was just like, yeah.
Yeah. No, it was 2005. I was coming out of the radio station where I used to work, and someone was actually going my way, and they said, "Byrne, do you want to ride?" And I said, "No, I just live 2 blocks away." But I get outside on the road right next to the the front of the radio station, the Chilkat Center there, and I'm on that, and it's dark.
And you just start going like this.
No, and I just literally, I didn't even have a chance to register it, because what was also happening was rain was falling directly on this black ice, and next thing I knew, my wrist was broken. I didn't even register the falling part didn't register because it happened so fast. It was just like
the snow's very active. It'll either be like real deep powder and fluffy, or it goes into crust and hard, or
right.
It's always just kind of like changing its form.
Well, you always have to keep an eye on it. Do you wear any kind of creepers or put screws into your shoes or anything to walk on the ice?
I used to, but I always lose them off of my boots, so I don't anymore.
Right.
I usually just go to the edge of the road where there's snow. And
you wear extra toughs?
I have mucks.
Okay. I found the extra toughs are actually pretty good for gripping because they have those little holes, and there'd be a little bit of a suction effect. And after that one major calamity where I broke my wrist, after that, I still kept wearing extra toughs and just got very wise about, and there were certain kinds of conditions I said, like, yeah, I don't need to really go out when it's raining on, and the worst part is the snowplows come and they shave the road to make it perfectly smooth. And that sounds nice, but it's the nightmare at night when it's raining.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't leave very much. I'm very much
Well, you have a car?
No, my car broke down like 2 years ago. I walk everywhere now.
Okay, so you're walking. You're out on what? Paradise? Not quite Paradise Cove. Letnikoff Cove.
Yeah, I'm at Paradise. Yeah.
Okay, but that's like a hefty walk.
Yeah. Well, fortunately here, everybody kind of knows everybody.
So they'll pick you up.
And on a cold, windy day, people don't drive by you. They stop and they're like, get in,
Yeah, well,
so I usually get a ride.
There's actually a law in Alaska that you can be arrested if you don't pick up a hitchhiker on a cold, like snowy day or something. Because if you don't, they could die. And certainly in some places, it gets so cold that if you just leave someone on the road, it's like you're condemning them to death.
Yeah, well, that is Good Samaritan laws. We have them on the Alcan, especially. Right. They have that law. If somebody's broken down, you can't drive past them without stopping to help them. Like you will be. I don't know how they penalize it, but it's a law.
Well, I suppose if you don't stop, and if the person gets a photo or writes your number down, your license number, then they'll find you.
Yeah. Well, the concern about the whole thing is who knows how long until the next car is coming and you're out hundreds of miles from anywhere, you know.
Did you ever meet Ray Menaker? You know him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ray, when I first got there, he was talking to me and he said, you know, I was talking to a friend on the phone the other day, and my friend lives like somewhere around, you know, Indiana or someplace. And my friend said, so how's the traffic up there? It was like a cold winter day, you know, the typical snow all over, but the roads are plowed. And Ray said, well, you know, I drove up to Cluckwan. That's like 21 miles up the road, the native Tlingit village. And he goes, and then I drove back and I didn't see one car.
I've had days here, and I'm in a more busy area than that.
Right, sure.
And I've had days here where I've made it practically all the way to town without a single car passing me.
Right.
And that's a long walk.
That is.
You know, that's a long walk.
That's it. Yeah. That's over 2 miles, about 3 kilometers. And yeah.
No, it's near to 6 miles.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Because you're a little bit further off. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're another click off or two. So, you know. So I guess, yeah. And it got really cold there, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. We had some like windy days down near 0 Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Let me just explain to my Celsius challenged friends, as they're really Fahrenheit challenged friends.
Well, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. 32 degrees is freezing, or 0 in Celsius. Here's why I don't like the Celsius system. When it's 32 degrees, are you cold?
Me? No,
yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's whatever.
I mean, it's cold, you know.
It doesn't really matter, though. It's not like you change your life. But 0 in Fahrenheit and 100 in Fahrenheit are genuinely cold and genuinely hot. And there's no mistaking either of those conditions for being what they are. And whereas I find that the people here in Georgia get really wimpy. They say, oh, it's down to 0. And I'm like, going, yeah, 0 Celsius means absolutely nothing. Who cares when water freezes? I want to know what I freeze, which is what Fahrenheit is actually based on. Mr. Fahrenheit, who originally did it, added salt to the water to be closer to the human blood, because it's your blood you worry about. And so you were saying it got down to 0 or so?
Near to 0, probably around 3 or 4.
Yeah. But then you had wind.
And then the wind picked up, and where in my cabin, it's all single pane windows. It's just one small room. It was built in the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, it when it blows in my house.
Right.
And it's really hard to be warm. And so it did get down there, and it did get challenging, but you know, I've been dealing with it for years now. I just kind of like, I go into town and I go to a coffee shop and warm up for an hour, then I hitchhike back home.
Yeah. Well, if it's down near 0 and then you get a serious wind, that's a serious wind chill. So I remember one day it was
minus 44 Fahrenheit.
Exactly. Yeah. That stuff will kill you, you know. Yeah. And you can hardly spend any time in a minus 44 wind chill. You know, it's just, I remember trying to get photos on the coldest day I remember there, which is about minus 45 or so, but it was also minus 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Mm-hmm. And that was, I was in my car staying warm. I'd get out, take a photo. By the time I was done with like 1 or 2 snaps, my fingers were already frozen. I had to get in. And, you know, so
I tried that day, because I was walking because the cars weren't coming by, and I was just trying to get to town to warm up, and it was really cold. I mean, I was bundled. Yeah. And it was still beautiful out. So I kept trying to take pictures, and every time I pulled my phone out, it would get so cold that it would just shut my phone off. It would just drain the battery out.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing is that cold just runs havoc on batteries, real cold, you know. Yeah. And so yeah, that's pretty crazy. Well, how's life been in Haines? Have you been paying attention at all? Well, you were saying something to me last time we talked, not for an actual recording like this, but when we talked personally, you were saying that the political situation there was getting kind of weird.
Yeah, well, you know, it depends on the person, but there are the people and you see that, you know, I lean more right in a lot of ways, just because of how I study information. And, and you got people who are more extreme than me, and they're like, I'm going to get my gun and I'm going to get my closet full of food, and anybody comes near, you know, because the end times are coming.
Right.
Well, now I'm finding people on the left saying, I'm going to get my gun, I'm going to get my closet full of food because the end times are coming. And it's really like this standoff. And I'm not saying this is a majority, but there's enough people who I've talked to where I'm like, wow, this is for real, because this isn't the lower 48. You know what I mean? This isn't that. And the division of worldview, the division of understanding of what is true and false is so divided. Like, people won't even look at another if they're on opposing views. They won't even, you know. And hopefully, you know, I stay home a lot, so hopefully over the last couple of weeks that's changed. But golly, I mean, you know, anybody out there who's really paying attention to the world situation knows that if you're really on top of things, what's going on with the people out there is like 8 months behind what's actually going on.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, to get to what's going on today for most of the public, you're going to have to wait until 8 months from now.
Right. Yeah. Normally though, in Alaska, I mean, as I remember things, people, you know, they might have differences of politics and stuff, but the Alaskan environment tends to bring people together. It's like, you know, are the salmon coming in? You know, how cold is it? You know, did you see that we actually had thunder, a rare event the other day? You know, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so that's weird to me that even the usual Alaskan good-natured, we're all in this together kind of thing. Although, you know, sometimes people are grumpy when they're together, but still, it seems to be fraying quite seriously in some ways.
You know, what I believe, though, is if any of these apocalyptic circumstances, which I have been fearing for a long time, really come to fruition, as soon as that media is shut off, everybody's going to drop that division.
Did you see that one? What was it? Someone posted a short video clip. I think it was like a GIF or something like that. And it showed these two dogs behind a fence, and one was on either side, and they were just snarling and growling at each other. And then they opened the fence, and the two dogs just kind of look at each other, sniff and stuff. Then they close the fence again, and they go back to growling and stuff. And I think that's what our media does to us. It hypes up certain aspects of things. I mean, I've seen, you know, people in Haines that I know, and, you know, and I see them just writing some of the most provocative stuff online. Like, you know, can you believe they did that again, kind of thing. To which I'm going, like, really? Are you surprised that there are people that, you know, whenever someone says things like, can you believe that it's like, I don't believe that, you know, and I'm going like, really? Is your experience of human nature so limited that you've never met people who have all sorts of different opinions than yourself?
If you don't believe that they're so radically different than you, then you're obviously not actually looking at what they're looking at. And so they're sitting there going, I can't believe you're that way.
Right.
You know,
well,
you have more together than you think.
I think one thing that 2020 and 2021 did to us was that it really shows who's listening and watching what. Because anyone who spent time with CNN, NPR, BBC, New York Times are all interpreting everything in one specific way. And the people who kind of kept an eye somewhat on that, but then looked at, you know, for instance, if there was some riot in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and if you just got away from the actual media feed of the mainstream media and looked at the actual videos of the event, you would say, oh, that's what that was, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas there were people who were really shocked and surprised by the verdict in that trial. And I'm sitting there going, really? Why were you shocked and surprised? Well, I know why. It's because you limited yourself to what you were being spoon-fed in order to make certain points about racial justice or whatever. And that the country is filled with white supremacists. But what the country seems to be filled with is people ready to explode because they're being stoked by propaganda.
I call NPR radio party radio. And, they outright lied about the Kenosha verdict. There was a witness on a stand, and he made a statement, and NPR radio got on and said he made the exact opposite statement. And everybody believed this, and there was all types of false beliefs, and all the beliefs were based upon being told what is going on instead of looking. Yeah. But you'll notice that the narrative in a lot of ways is extremely crumbling, because after so many 4-6 years of people going, no, you got to look at the source, some people on the left are finally starting to actually look at the source.
Yeah.
And it's wreaking havoc on the media environment.
Yeah. I don't believe in conspiracy theories much or anything, but I do believe it's what Francis Schaeffer once said. He said, a conspiracy isn't really necessary, because all you need is that the people who tell us what is the news all share the same biases. And that is what I think we've seen. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was sorry. I was just adding commentary.
But I think that it's easy. This is where the right goes nuts. They do see conspiracies under every rock, which then becomes their propaganda bubble. That is to say, once you start putting your mind inside a propaganda theory, that, it's just like all these people have to believe X. This is what's really happening. I tend to think that the world is a lot more chaotic than that. That, for instance,
and nuanced.
Yeah, and for instance, what's going on in Russia and Ukraine is a lot more fluid than we understand. But I also believe that because people are, I think for instance, when we went into Iran, that was a conspiracy theory we were going after, but just as much as the people who were against the war were all believing certain conspiracy theories as well. I mean, I think what we've seen the last 20 years is that our main beliefs have become conspiracy theories about what's going on, which is why I used to say to people, if you read Time or Newsweek, if you listen to NPR, you can get some things on there. Sometimes you have to realize that, okay, such an event happened, and we have to make sure that we kind of see through it and see, where the propaganda is coming in, because they'll often use the same words, but something happened. But now I don't think I even trust them to know what's going on. I mean, they spent how many years with the Trump Russia possible collusion, literally those three words, on and on and on. It was proved more than once to be just a complete fabrication. And you never hear anybody apologize for that.
No, actually, a lot of them are still standing by it because they own a segment of the population's worldview and belief.
Well, that's where the propaganda comes in. Because propaganda, Jacques Ellul said that the point of propaganda isn't even really to change your beliefs, it's to change your action.
Well, America has been successfully segregated for a fact. We are successfully segregated. And so it doesn't matter if you're on the side of the truth or on the side of the lie, you've lost when you're segregated, when you're divided. And this nation can't be divided and exist. And it's up to the multitude of individuals to wake up to this reality. Last time I spoke to you, I on interview, like on video, I talked about the pendulum swinging back, and that the right is going to have to understand they're positioning themselves to be exactly what was happening to them for years. And they're going to go happily into oppressing over the left, thinking that, it is our time for revenge, even though it may not be a conscious revenge. But I can't stress it enough to guard yourself. And as I am becoming more and more of a Christian, I would say guard yourself in that. But to those who aren't Christian, I would just say guard yourself in some type of reconciliation and understanding that more than 90% of the American people have been mentally manipulated and abused for years, like a literal abuse and manipulation. And most of Americans are a victim of this propagatory environment, which vies for power and control, you know?
Well, that is the point of my whole How We Got Here series, in the sense that one of the things I feel that happened was during World War II in particular, we had to fight the propaganda of the Nazis. And so what we did was we turned on our own propaganda machine. And then during the Cold War and after World War II, we just never turned it off. And then that generated an alternative set of propagandas, which became ultimately got, involved with the New Left and the hippies and alternative forms of living, really. But in a sense, what happened was we turned the machine on hardcore and then lost the key to turn it off. And I think that's where we've been ever since, one way or another. What's interesting to me now is how many people who would have been on opposite sides of the culture war in the 90s are now on the same side looking at what's developed. In a weird way, I tend to look at, I don't know, the woke hydra. I don't know what to call it, but we tend to look at it as if almost like the children of both of those things. It's the children of the censorious right and the children of the, collectivist left getting together and making like a new era of strangeness, bringing together. I mean, I see all the time gays and Christians and Black people and white people, people of different ethnicities, people of different backgrounds, all kind of on this one side over here, more and more going like, what is going on? But I think after Trump lost and when Biden came in, we entered some sort of twilight zone. Because after that point, during the Trump era, there was this weird kind of us and them thing, which I think is still there. But now it just seems very like, where are we? Because Biden seems like some old relic, which he kind of is. And he's just, it's obvious that, there's just so much weird stuff going on, ever since the Afghanistan thing and the inflation and everything else, people are going like, what is going on? And no one really knows. Biden doesn't know. Do his handlers know?
I actually, being a recluse in a cabin, have some pretty good ideas about what's going on and what we're facing. And I really don't like talking to them about people because I don't want to be fear mongering. And
you tend to take a darker turn.
Well, when you look at the M1 money supply and how it just shot straight up like a line,
right?
And you look at the poisoning of many large nations' military capacities and their need for resources and technologies, and you look at the self-righteousness of not having to apologize to nations, but just to continue forward because what you're doing is good, and based upon your propaganda of your people, they will all back you in it. The conclusion really is obvious, and I don't want to say it out loud because I want to be wrong. Well, I don't want bombs dropping and people starving and things that have been happening all through history, but America is soft to because of the blessings which we've got to have at the expense of others for so many years. And what we really need to do is wake up and give back to the rest of the world in a more loving and compassionate manner. But we don't have loving and compassionate leaders with a loving and compassionate message. And it really does boil down to the simplicity of your heart and people's hearts and hearts as a nation. There's no unified heart. And and this is why I've been praying every day since, from morning until night. I'm going crazy in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And because the only salvation here is that message of love which came from Christ, in my opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to turn anybody away from listening to things by, but I also don't want to turn myself away from speaking the truth either. It's a really delicate balance. But the fact is we're on computers, and we allow ourselves to use these computers in the full knowledge that a lot of this was made with slave labor, literal and real slave labor, where people's lives are harmed, and we're uncaring for the convenience of ourselves. And look, maybe they're not, maybe I'm wrong, but like I look around my room and around my life, and it's like everywhere I turn my head, it's like there's that thing that does harm. There's that thing that causes enmity. There's that thing that causes division. And all of these aspects of our nature, politically and socially, all are really from a corrupt source. And until you could see reality as being corrupted, then you got to, once you do, you got to go, okay, well, if all of this is corrupted, what's the one thing that I don't know? What's the one thing that I can't prove? Because that is probably the thing that is greater than my corruption, and that's why I'm really coming to this whole religion thing. I don't like calling it religion, but it's just so hard to reconcile with people, because I live very isolated, and I don't know Christians, and I don't know Buddhists, and I don't know Muslims, and I don't know anybody other than we're people who are just busy and don't think. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they're busy, so they don't have the time to dissect everything as crazily as I do. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm sorry for rambling.
No problem. Yeah, well, I think, like I said, we've entered a strange time, and there are some very bad possibilities that are there. But my feeling is always that, in a sense, I always see that when it comes to the larger collective of, a state, a country, the humanity, the earth, whatever, there's a lot of dark potential. But when I look at individuals, I tend to see, okay, we're not down and out yet, because there are enough people who are willing. I see more people now who are just, a lot of people just kind of going like, where have we been? What's going on? I need to think more. And I have a bit of hope on that basis.
Well, that's good.
That is to say, I see people, will it play out? I don't know. But I know that without a little bit of hope, and real hope, not false hope, there can't be anything. I mean, the reason I do everything I do, like the reason I even am on YouTube, I mean, I've thought about this in the past. It was just like how easy it would be just to not communicate with anyone, to, back up. I have all these books and records and CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays and, lots, people have, you've been to my house, how much junk I have. So it'd be easy just to squirrel yourself away in there. And if you can find some source of whatever to keep yourself going and just kind of keep, and then there's this problem. Even if
I don't recommend it. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Even if you can do that, all of those books and all of those records and all of those movies, all the music, all the poems, all the everything you touch is essentially going to point you right back to the problems. That is, exactly. You're not going to get out because, if you say, well, then I'm not going to watch things that depress me. But, I can get depressed watching a Disney movie, very easily because they're so fake, and there is no security in that regard. There is no way to hide. There is no way to get away from it. As I think you understand out there, because especially today, I suppose there was a time when a person, and if you really try hard enough, you can make this happen, where you can go off, live totally by yourself, and do not communicate with anyone else. But in fact, as you know, you just a click on a computer away from watching everything happen. We're not separated from the world. We can't do that.
No.
So
I mean, I can't tell you how many days, how many sessions of Senate, and how many sessions of Congress, and how many, watching the judiciary, and how many interviews with the press secretary of the president or the president himself. And
right.
I can't tell you how much time I've spent in this, and all it does is inflame me, because I'm just sitting here like a passive observer of
right.
the fall of man,
Right. Well, to me, the answer has to be, I think some people, there are monks here in Georgia. Some people go off and their job is to essentially pray for others. But even those monks aren't alone. There's a couple, I suppose, living up on cliff sides and things like that. But
do you mind if I talk about this?
Yeah, go.
So I 4 days ago, whatever, I began to look around me and see the state of reality of my own actions and beliefs and thoughts. And I began praying very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that, I'm not, and I recognize that, like, I was praying, I'm like, well, I need someone sent here to be with me, because I can't repent of sin. Like, I will constantly be repenting all day long, and I constantly have been repenting all day long. And it's like you need that strength that comes with, brotherhood or whatever you call it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, being a monastic is like, I go from being totally off to being totally on. I'm never really halfway off and on.
Right.
And at this point, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I will pray all day. I will seek God all day. I will proclaim God all day. I will do this, But the thing about it is like, you plead and you deal and you cry to that that this light will shine in you. But what happens when your vessel is already full and it's full of junk? There's nowhere for it to come in. And so you just try to, like, well, I have faith that I'll receive faith. And so I just kind of make a little niche and a little notch, and I wish I was more collected in my thinking. I've been thinking about this a lot, but you caught me off guard this morning. I would have had it more prepared, but like, I don't want to be half on and I don't want to be off. I want to be all the way for God anymore in my life. And I don't know, I can't instruct myself in it. You know what I'm saying? I can't instruct myself in it. And so when you talk about, like, the monks in the monasteries, it intrigues me greatly. I've been looking at orthodoxy a lot in the last few days. It's intriguing. I never even heard about it before you went to Georgia. Go ahead.
Let me just say that by saying that, I'm going to get comments on this video from all sorts of people going like, well, you should do this and that. And I'll just say that. But
okay.
but keep going.
Well, I mean, I have a lot of questions. I mean, to enter a monasticism, I'm not opposed to it, because I believe that there is no good thing I could do, and dedicating myself to, a redeemer that lives is
Mm-hmm.
more important than anything I could come up with. But at the same hand, there's a lot of questions that need answered with orthodoxy to me.
Sure.
Like, for instance, is it okay that I talk about this, or would it be offending people? Please don't be
No.
offended.
Go.
But
I'm
like,
sure that the people who watch my channel, a good large majority of them, find these kind of conversations very interesting.
Okay, well, don't be offended by the following if you're an Orthodox, but this is a thing that I'm thinking about. So I heard a monastic talking like a letter or whatever from Mount Athos, and they said that their father had passed away and they'd sent for him and he didn't go. And what the question that popped in my mind immediately was, did his father ask in Jesus' name to see his son before he died? And if he asked in Jesus' name, would the church deny that miracle that can be done as a human in our fallen state, that thing that could be given in the name of Christ for the sake of the system of monasticism? And, I don't want to be offensive. It's just a question I have,
I personally don't know the rules for monasticism, particularly in a Georgian Orthodox context, which would be a bit different than a Greek Orthodox context, because Orthodoxy tends to be very specific to its country. And so Russian Orthodoxy is different than Serbian Orthodoxy, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know what the rules are. And there are rules. Once you become a monk, it's not like,
it's for life.
It's also not, it's not like joining the Presbyterian Church, It's not like church shopping. And so it's something that they would require you to seriously think about it before you did it. And I mean, seriously, they would probably want to prevent you from doing it unless you felt there was nothing else that could be asked of you. So,
yeah. Well, like I told you, like, I'm thinking about going to Georgia. I mean, and the first thing in my mind was, I'm going to get off the plane. I'm going to go right to a church and I'm going to ask how you get baptized. You know what I mean? Like that was my whole.
It isn't going to happen like that.
I'm a radical person. I always just jump in.
But it isn't going to happen like that for the very reason I just said about the monks. With Orthodoxy, you become a catechumen, which means you have to go through. They don't. Unlike, I mean, even like I said, I used the Presbyterian Church because I remember it in Alaska, and even the Presbyterian Church, you just don't join. You got to go through.
Yeah, I wasn't saying that they would baptize me on the spot. I understand you start as a seeker and go to a catechumen and all this.
Yeah.
But it was just like I have this zeal. You know?
But it's a bit more of a commitment than anything that you find in, I wouldn't say all Protestant denominations, but in the majority of them.
Yeah.
I think being a Hutterite or Amish is a very different kettle of fish. And I do have one friend that I talked to, a guy named Julian, through. We've had conversations and such online, and he's a Hutterite, lives in Canada. And that's a very different kettle of fish, because the Hutterites have I think the difference between a Hutterite and a monk is that Hutterites take a collective vow more than an individual vow. It's like we're all in this together. Whereas I think as I understand, monks, it's like you have to, has to be happening here, and you have to really choose that. So,
so I heard, I'm sorry. I heard this Orthodox, I guess they call them fathers, speaking about this guy. He was reading and talking on this Saint Theophan the Recluse.
Right.
And when I heard the words of this Theophan, this Saint Theophan, no. He was talking about the degraded state of the sinner and how far the fall is and how deep into the flames people are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird, because I've been pretty much shut out from the world, not completely, but for the most part, just witnessing what is taking place as opposed to participating in it. For a lot of years now, and it's like I found myself in the flames. I found myself going to hell, and it's like, so I'm not a monastic of in Christ. I was more of a monastic in the fall, more of a monastic in I had to just see how utterly degraded I am and how dependent I am upon mercy, and I don't know, this is weird. I guess I'm speaking out of turn. I don't want to make myself sound like
No, I understand what you're saying. It's that there is a lot of darkness, a tremendous lot. I think much more than people understand. I mean, when Solzhenitsyn says, a fine Orthodox Russian, says that the line between good and evil is not between parties, but runs right through our own hearts, you know. And he says in the same quote that even in the best of persons, a small beachhead of evil exists. And even in the worst of persons, a small beachhead of good exists, you know. And I think when you understand that, Hans Ruckmacher said in his What is Reality lecture that I put up, he says, you know, we've written hundreds, maybe thousands of books on the grace of God, and very few books on the curse of God. That is to say, what does it mean to live in a fallen world? Relatively few books compared to that. He says, how do you know, he says, if this reality can be counted on if you don't understand how deep the curse goes?
Yeah.
And
no, I'm glad you told me that. That's a really.
So it's, to me, there's always, for instance, with ourselves, there's always an element of, there's always something in which is wrong. There's some way in which we're deceiving ourselves. This is why I think one of the greatest fallacies of the last part of the 20th century up to the present is the idea of following your dream, following your bliss, following your heart, like your heart isn't entirely mixed with motives.
So, man. I mean, think about prayer.
Yeah, go ahead.
How you can go into these vain imaginings and these motives, and you start writing and commanding God for what your prayer is, as opposed to, you know, actually seeking it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, what they've done is they've taken the positive aspects of redemption. You know, for instance, all things work to the good of those who love Christ. You know, that idea, and then snipped out the part at the end. And then just said all things work to the good, you know, so you just have to be positive as if you could, and you can't simply be positive. If I meet anyone who's simply positive, I'm like, I'm sorry. I mean, no. Did I tell you about the girl I knew who was a violin player, and she was, we had this like Jesus People group back in the early 70s. And she was, we were singing. So we were making up these songs and stuff. Well, some of them were okay, but she was a violin player. So she played with us, and she was always, she went to an evangelical free church, and she was always so happy. She was always so positive, so up. Whenever you'd meet her, she just seemed like she radiated the peace of God, the love of God. And one day I got a call, and her body was found on the side of the road, and she had stabbed herself to death. And we all said to ourselves, no, that can't be. It has to be a killer had killed her. But yet the police were convinced she had done it herself. She was a week away from graduating university. She had a boyfriend. And like I said, we were completely filled with doubt about this because she seemed so filled with peace and joy. And then we heard
it seems like something hard to do.
But here's the thing. So then we heard a story from an Episcopal minister, and he said she had come into his church at the town of Point Reyes Station, and she was up in the front of the church. She was just by herself praying, and he walked up and he saw her. And I guess their eyes met, and he said, you just look so filled with the peace of God. And she looked at him and said, I could kill myself right now.
Wow.
And what I realized is that people who put on the smile as a mask, I just like, you know, or the be positive all the time, I've just learned never to trust that. I mean, there are happy people, there are people who, but to me, a person who really sees what they can do is not filled with optimism all the time. They're filled with, the world is too dark for that. So what they're filled with is courage, the courage to go ahead, even though everything could turn to shit.
Well, as opposed to positivity, I mean, what about just loving kindness?
Well, yeah.
Because loving kindness doesn't always have to be a positive notion, you know, but I mean,
again, we're faced with the same thing. How much of our love is that we want people to love us? How much of our love is we want people to see how much we love them? You see, there's always the thing inside of us that pulls us towards wanting it to ultimately be about ourselves, which of course,
yeah, very obviously,
yeah.
the narcissism is
right.
You're never going to escape.
And our society pats us on the back and says, that's such a good thing. And you should become yourself, and other people should recognize how good you are. So don't criticize the wrong people.
I mean, that's why I don't even like talking about spiritual things. I'm being brave now and doing it because I recognize the nature of me to be, self-idolatrous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I was to be guided to make intercession all day, I'd want to be locked away where nobody could see it. And I couldn't even, if there was a miracle to occur, I couldn't even see it because unless I said, oh, I did that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah, I hear that. That's yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it always means even in the best of times. And right now, my life is pretty good. I moved into a place, I'm paying $300 a month rent for about, I'm trying to think of it, by American standards, this is not that big, but by your standards right now, this is pretty big. But essentially it's, let's see, 9 times 3, 180 square feet of space, and I spend about $50 a month on utilities.
1,800 square feet.
Huh?
1,800 square feet.
Well, it's 90 square meters. Am I doing something wrong?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my cabin is 20 by 20, and that's 400 square feet.
Okay.
So,
you mean square feet? Yeah. Okay. Whatever. I don't.
Oh, you're doing square meters. I'm sorry. I don't know the metric system. I'm one of them.
No, but it's 3 times that for whatever. I'm probably getting some zeros wrong. But the point is, I have a pretty good place here. And my situation is good. I had a friend over today. We went and looked. We found actually a block and a half from me, an actual restaurant that served Mexican food. And that is so hard to find here because
it's hard to find here.
Yeah. So, but it was actually started by an American guy who just said, he's a chef that started quite a few restaurants. And he said, I can't find any Mexican food here. So I'm going to start another restaurant that's just for Mexican food. And it's serious, real Mexican style Mexican food, as opposed to what I find with Chinese food here is it's all what I call, there's a couple nice Chinese restaurants here, but what they have is what, the real word for Georgia is sakartvelo. And the language is really Kartuli. It's not Georgian, it's Kartuli in the original language. So the carts have to do with Georgians. And so what I call the Georgian Chinese food here is Cartonese.
Okay.
Because it's like it's not really any specific Chinese style, and it's just whatever Georgians think. Because I never see Chinese people actually serving it. It's always Georgian. Yeah. And so, but no. So like I was saying, I was with my friend today. We were at this Mexican restaurant a block and a half from me, and he says, "Byrne, you live in such a good area. I mean, I've got 2 huge, great stores, grocery stores next to me, and about a minute walk each.
Yeah,
I've got the pretty fast buses going 2 different directions, bus stops that have about, I don't know, 10, 15 buses on them, so I can go all over the place. I've got my mail system, USA to Georgia, is half a block away. I've got another place we went to today that's got even better food in some ways. And then there are all these restaurants. There's butcher shops. There's all sorts of people selling fruit. There's a guy who drives up with what is it? He has a van. He opens it up and he brings in food from the villages to sell on the street.
Good.
And then a block going the other way is essentially, I think, the largest park in Georgia, which then leads straight into the mountains. And there's a what they call a ropeway or a gondola that goes up on a wire all the way up there. So if I just want to go up and walk back, and then, I mean, literally, if you start going into that mountain, you can just hike all the way to Armenia, which is quite a ways away. So
I can't wait to come there.
Yeah. So speaking of which, what are you thinking? Tell me more about your I want to come to Georgia ideas.
Well, right now I'm waiting on my birth certificate so I can apply for my passport. So it's going to take a while.
Right.
If we were free to travel on this earth without the interference of, people who make war with each other, I'd be there already.
Right.
Yeah, my whole thought is, I'm 40 years old. I've been living in this cabin for near 10 years now. And the world isn't what we think it is. And quite frankly, I'm scared. And from what I've understood about Georgia, not that it's like always been the safest place. In fact, I think it's been pretty far from that in its history in many regards.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a realistic place. And I could be wrong. I've never been there.
Yes, but I would say so.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it for myself. I'd
say there is a fair amount of realism here. There's also Georgians tend to look at their history in almost mythological terms. Things in the past tend to drift into becoming myths relatively soon here, in a way that doesn't happen in America. In America, we're still fighting over what happened in the 60s and such. But here, once they get away from, say, the 90s or the Soviet period, it already starts to create there's something that happens. I can't really explain it, but I see it. And
I know very little of their history, and I think it's mythical. I mean, they have a secured language for how long?
Yeah,
that's like the only one like it. They've been they've been Christians since nearly the 4th century or before.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing. Like I never heard of it until you moved there. Like it's a gem of earth.
Yeah.
I'm really, really intrigued to get there. You know?
Did I tell you this? Did I tell you the story that the Georgians tell of how they got the land?
I think you did. Would you say it again?
Yeah. Well, this is the story they tell. They said when God was handing out all the countries of the earth, all the nations were there to get their allotted share, but the Georgians weren't, because they were having a big dinner and drinking wine. And they came, typically in Georgian fashion, late. And they came up to God and they said, well, we're here. What have you got left for us? And God says, hey, I handed out everything and you missed it. And they said, yes, but we weren't just getting drunk or whatever. We were toasting in your name. And God was so touched by this that he said, okay, I'll give you the bit of land I was saving for myself.
Yeah, it's cool. Now I gotta see. Now I want to go there even more.
Yeah,
my big hindrance is, Byrne, is that I've been so like, I don't know how to explain it. I've just been rejecting the world so much because of the great harm that I see that it does to itself, that I've pretty much put myself into poverty. And so getting there, I'm going to do what I can, but I've worked, but I haven't had a job in like 4 years. I just cut wood for people or shovel snow off of a roof or, do this or do that and make the meager living that I have just to keep me alive. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, I should have been making a bank account, because now I want to go to Georgia, and they don't need me to come to Georgia without money. They need me to come to Georgia with a lot of money. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that's what's healthy for Georgia. And I don't want to go there and be unhealthy, Well, anyway.
You were telling me though that you were thinking of roping your dad in on this.
Yeah, he's willing too, and that would be a major boon because he can definitely afford it, and
Right.
and it's not that I can't afford it. It's that I want to be giving when I'm there. I don't want to be budgeting, and
Right.
because it makes a poor guest. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And
Well, like I said, and as I said earlier, things are going well right now, but I also know never to trust that for too long. It's like
no,
happiness to me.
I'm scared. I want to be there now.
Happiness to me comes, and you should appreciate it while it's here, because tomorrow it may disappear.
Yeah.
Everything may work out for a while, but nothing ever works out for a while, for a long time. I mean, look at Haynes. Haynes is situated in an amazing place. And I think part of its problems come from that fact, just as many of California's problems come from the fact that it's situated in such an amazing landscape of possibilities. So it's also attracted a lot of people who aren't worthy of those possibilities. They just want the warmth and the beaches or whatever. They don't want what's good for the country. But
well, yeah, I mean, I could. Oh, sorry.
Well, the first two, the two tribes that were there, the Tlinkits and the Chilkats, were already, before anybody showed up there, were already kind of like at each other's throats on occasion because of the land. It's like, okay, you have to stay over there, and we're up here. And of course, the Chilkats were more powerful, and
well, they would go down to where I'm from and take slaves.
Yeah. So it starts there, but then you get all these different people. So you get the missionaries and the gold miners and the U.S. Army, and then people coming up after World War II, and then you get those people who had this idea for kind of some sort of collective communal situation with the natives and stuff. But then you get like people coming up who are trying to get back to the land. But then you've also got Vietnam, and even World War II veterans were up there. And then you get the high school students who are living in a more modern era, and you get people coming and working for the summer who are in their own space. And so you get all these different people with different visions of how they want to live there. So, but nevertheless, it's because it's a really interesting place. I mean, I loved my time there. But now I think about the fact that there was that huge landslide last year and the water. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if the weather gets weird, that could even be more of a problem, because all of those mountains down near the water are basically glacial moraines, which means they're big, huge dirt and sand piles. And even if you put a blanket of trees on them, that doesn't help it if the whole thing gets saturated, as we saw with that terrible rock, dirt, whatever slide last year, and took out a bunch of houses and killed a few people, And so even in the place that has so much good about it, suddenly everything can go dark.
One thing I get sick of hearing from people living here, and it's probably just me being judgmental.
It's possible.
But I get sick of hearing people say, well, what does that stuff matter? We're in Haines. And I'm like, look, if the country is going over to some factional partyism that is oppressive, who cares? It's just Haines. Who cares? It's just Haines is what you say until the day they send their troops up here.
Well, also,
and then you're like, what happened? You know what I mean? It's like,
also the town is fairly split politically.
Yeah. But the largest faction in Haines is, who cares? We're in Haines.
Right.
Like, the world doesn't matter. It'll never touch us. We're safe here. You know, it's very naive.
Well, there's some truth to it, in that people aren't going to send troops up there because it's just too far. Who cares?
Well,
but
we have copper.
The fact is,
the whole world knows we have copper here. The whole world knows we have gold here. And when all of the battling, it's not just about our generation, but following generations. When all the battling soldiers and stuff go to each other, and the nations rise and fall, and they come to power, and the nation comes to power and goes, well, America's now weak, and look, there's gold and copper over there. We can just go take it. I mean, the United States itself has gone into nations for less than what's here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, it's
very scary.
One of the things most people don't understand about, particularly Southeast Alaska, is how many resources are actually there. And, people often look at me like, oh, you were living in this place where you were suffering. I go like, who's suffering? I've got, by the end of the summer, I don't do any fishing, and I've got a freezer full of fish.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I suppose if you're looking for, there's certain kind of things that people look for, maybe those things aren't there. But if you're looking for the basics of survival and a lot of other resources that have never been tapped, they're all there,
Yeah.
I mean, interestingly enough, like, I learned to hunt mushrooms there. And interestingly enough, the natives were living there, thousands of years and never looked at mushrooms. Or if they did, they probably ate the wrong ones and died and then forgot about it. But whereas I go up there and I go like, how many mushrooms are here?
A lot.
Billion. And so many different kinds that are edible. And it's the same with, you look around, it's like, it's all trees. You look around at someone once did a hydro study in I think it was around 1965, and they went through the Chilkat Valley, and they said, 250,000 people could easily live in this valley. So, and I've heard that that won't happen.
It just worries me, that because Americans, we only really think about the next 10 years at best.
Right.
We don't think about the nature of history and how big it is. And so we have a large faction of environmentalists unawares that we're digging up all the resources everywhere else. And once they're spent everywhere else, all eyes are going to turn on us. But they're only concerned about saving the earth for their life, not for all life.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the best thing to do would be to dig it up and get it out of here as quick as possible so no one comes and makes danger.
Well, there are environmental issues here, and I won't go into them all. And it has to do with, for instance, damming rivers in order to provide electricity for Bitcoin manufacture.
Oh, that's
fortunately, the actual high altitudes around here, there's not a lot of development there. And one of the things I really like is that, if you've watched any of my videos going way up into the mountains, you'll see a mountain. It starts at about, a valley. It starts at about 7,500 feet or 8,000 feet, goes straight up for another 2,000 or 3,000 feet, all meadows with cows and sheep on them.
Yeah. Just keep breeding cows.
Georgia
has, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, Georgia has quite a few. Even in Tbilisi here, you see all these trees along the street, and then you look closer at them, and you see, they're all like fruit and nut trees, and all those vines hanging over everything. They're all grapes.
Oh, sounds amazing. I want to go there so bad.
And people just leave them there.
Yeah.
And you know what though? When times get tough, there you go.
Yeah.
All this backup. So.
Well, we got to be more, as a people, like as a, I don't know, an American people or just a people of the world, I think that we got to be more entrenched in feeding one another. I watch politics very closely, and I could spend another couple hours just talking about the bills I read and the laws that I study and stuff. But what with all this economic crises, you'll never hear anybody say the word train in Washington, D.C.
Right.
They're opposed to trains, and they're talking about getting people in the workforce and the preservation of water, but they're not talking about creating more farms or opportunity for more farming. They're not talking about diverting water from where it's being abused, which is in product manufacturing, and putting it back into farms. They're not, they're trying to build from the top of a pyramid as opposed to the bottom of the foundation. Yeah. And where we find ourselves in the historical context of a nation is, if we actually do want to see through this as a people, we're going to have to get back to the root of food production, because who wouldn't want to be a nation that feeds the world? Who wouldn't want that? That's a beautiful thing. But we don't ever talk about this openly because we're so abused and pushed around by these large international, multinational corporations that that make doodads of no function or use other than to give us a psychological ping every once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
well, I feel this here. I've just been looking for furniture to buy for my house. And it's amazing how little real wood furniture exists anymore. And I've looked at so much. So I found a bed that was just simple, just wood, frames, that's it. And I was so happy to find that, because sitting next to it were all these things as pressed muck with veneer or photos of wood. There's resins that imitate wood, all this other stuff. And we make this stuff, and then it's cheap, it breaks, and then people get another one and it's cheap and breaks. And rather than getting something, at least with wood, when it breaks, you know what you can do with it. You can keep yourself warm with it. You can rebuild something else with it. You can, but with all of this junk that we make, all this, like it's the soft reboot of furniture. It's like,
well, it's all about trying to find satisfaction outside of God. Nobody is content with what they have. I mean, you look at the American people, like my grandparents. You go to my grandma's house, it is the same furniture, same appliances, same things as it was in 1962, and they're all there and they're all working, and she's content with it.
Oh, exactly.
But it's a lack of contentedness that makes it so there isn't enough wood left for everybody in the world to have tables, because we need to make all of this stuff to throw away or whatever. And
I go to different stores here looking for things. I have some really nice cast iron pots and pans back in Alaska that will eventually, Lord willing, come here this year. But I go looking for something to cook with, and I see for instance, every pan has got something like Teflon on it. And they're all the kind of thing they'll work for a few years. I bought one, worked for like two and a half years, and in the end, it's just looking like, death warmed over. So finally,
Teflon's bad stuff. Every human being on the planet has Teflon in their blood.
Everyone is so
in blood. You have to go back before World War I blood banks.
Right. Well, everyone is so convinced that they need pans that don't stick, that they don't know how to season a real iron pan. So I eventually just bought an actual carbon pan. It cost me more, but you know what? That pan should last me the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I've seasoned it. It's working well now. And that's what people aren't willing to do. So they'll spend less money in the short term, but more money in the end,
Yeah.
And for instance,
and it's not just money they're spending, it's compassion.
Exactly. And they're also filling their houses up with junk. So a lot of people were saying, oh, it was so nice when all the bottle manufacturers shifted to, hard plastic, say in the 90s or whatever. And the bottles, the glass jars all started to disappear. And I would hear people say, yes, now when the bottle drops, it doesn't shatter glass all over the floor. Isn't that wonderful? Our children can be safe. I'm going like, yeah, you just mortgaged your future on that. Because now there's so much plastic.
We used to return the bottles and they would wash them and fill them back up.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I try as much as possible, but sometimes it's so hard to find anything of quality in certain areas. I save all sorts of bottles. And actually, my friend who was over today looked at all the way I have these glass jars full of tea and full of spices and stuff. And he goes like, I really like the way you do this. I go like, yeah, well, I think about it. I mean, it's not just that it's there, but there's also an aesthetic factor. Glass just looks nicer than aging plastic, And so I will buy some. If two of the same product are sitting next to each other on a shelf or relatively similar, I'll buy the glass bottle rather than the plastic. And I realize it's like totally like, well, who cares? This isn't going to change anything. But again, it's my idea that, okay, well, maybe we've screwed ourselves in the future, but you know what? I'm personally not going to let that worry me. That is to say, if the future is screwed, the future is screwed. But meanwhile, let me do my little thing. And maybe by just having my jars look aesthetically interesting, maybe someone else will look at that and go like, huh. And what seems just like for a moment, like just something Byrne is doing, may spread to a couple of other people. But you see, this is how changes come, real changes. They come from what's happening inside rather than what's happening. You know, it's like big movements to, we've got to do something about the environment. That doesn't work, because if you do that and you really get everyone to, it's authoritarianism. You know,
you don't got to do something about the environment. You got to do something about your life.
Exactly.
It is a lack of willing to look inside and be critical of yourself.
Right. Well, this is also my problem with so many people are online, and a lot of these same people are online are complaining about the environment. And my thought is, well, what are you complaining about? You're living a semi-nomadic life with junk, and you know what? You don't even know what the environment is. You know, you don't live in it. I mean, I think if a person works outside doing anything, whether picking berries or working in a garden or constructing something on their own, like I've got to build my bookshelves, you start to have an appreciation for the things of this world. And it's not until people have an appreciation that they will be able to save it, because anything before that is going to be a government top down, you need to all change or else kind of approach, which we don't. Well, I think Jordan Peterson recently said this, that actually the climate stuff is going to be much more problematic. He said, our reaction to the climate is going to be much more damaging than what the climate actually does itself. And I believe that our fear, our greed, will cause us much more damage in the end than ever would have happened because of the climate itself.
Well, you know, like I don't have a lot by American standards. By American standards, I think I'm poor. I don't really know though, because
I am.
You know, everybody seems to be doing okay. But
I was just thinking about this. My money comes from, you know, whatever I'm getting right now as Social Security, which I can tell you is a pretty low tier. It's not like I'm getting what, you know, someone who makes $100,000 a year gets for Social Security. I'm getting something way down there. But I am grateful. Somehow, you know, I don't know how God did this, but I ended up here for that rather than if I was in Alaska right now, I'd be scrimping and saving everything. I would feel completely tight most of the time.
Well, I don't know how I make it through because I don't have any money.
Right.
But somehow I always end up being able to get just enough through some effort to be able to stay here. I'm very blessed that I have the cheapest rent in the country.
Right.
But what I was going to say is, you know, and even though I don't have as much as many other around me, I have this small cabin and it has all of this stuff. You know what I mean? It has like books and right here's a TV that I never look at because I don't watch TV. And, you know, I have like all this stuff, but you know, I never leave here and I probably touch 4 or 5 things a day. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I'm convinced that we're lost seeking God, but we're so educated and stubborn that we misplace that with things. And am I making any? I'm probably not making any sense.
No. I remember my friend Vanessa said she went down to I don't remember the name of it, but to I think it was Northwest Bible College or something like that down in the Seattle area, and she said that to get into church, to chapel, you had to run through a magnetized card. And then all of they wanted to make sure the kids were going to chapel. But when she was back at the dorms, all the kids, basically all these supposedly Christian kids, were mostly talking about going to the mall and shopping. You know, I think today they might be talking about, you know, Amazon more, but I think that we live in a very strange time. We've made life abstract, you know, and I think we were talking about this just a few minutes ago, where we were talking about, you know, the idea that people were looking for ways to put things together, what makes things work. And one thing I keep thinking more about is what Michael Polanyi said about what he said is that the lower conditions do not explain the higher conditions. The fact that I'm made of water doesn't explain who Byrne is. The fact that I have DNA doesn't explain these words coming out of my mouth. But he says the higher conditions actually explain the lower ones, which makes a lot more sense because, for one thing, how would we even know about H2O if we didn't use our brains, which are much more advanced than water, to explore it? So in other words, by starting at the bottom, we can't get to the top. By trying, this was the modernist project, to pull things apart and to figure out what makes us tick. But the problem is, by doing that, you can never explain. I mean, this is why, Jordan Peterson and others, one of the things they often talk about evolutionary psychology and what the chimpanzees or lions or the lobsters did. And there's a certain amount of stuff we can learn from that. However, there's nothing in any of those things that will explain who we are. That is to say, no amount of chimpanzee psychology is going to explain 2020 on the world, what happened in that year. It's because what we have to do is we have to start with the complexity that we find to explain everything else, because the truth is, there is much more that we don't understand. We have to start assuming that. And to me, that's where we start with God, the most complex of all. And then we come down to us, through whatever layers you want to talk about in between. But we come to us, and then we can keep going down. But what we find when we get down far enough is whoa, wait a minute, this is still complex.
Yep.
Whether it's,
but see, I think you touched on something that a lot of the world doesn't understand.
Exactly.
If it's bottom up, where does compassion come from?
Right.
Because compassion is not a bottom up argument.
No.
It isn't, because if you base everything upon the science, there isn't any room for it.
Right. No, you're not going to look at swans or chimpanzees or whatever and come to any sort of conclusion about why it's good to forgive people.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to start with the fact that we pretty much know you got to forgive people, even people.
Well, a lot of people don't know that.
Well, it's easy to pretend they don't. But here's the thing: when they themselves are injured or have done the injury, if someone forgives them, it matters. And they know. I was just communicating with someone the other day, and I was making the point that I think universally, we all know love is important. However, culturally, we may live in such a way that for instance, I think everyone who's human kind of in their heart knows monogamy is the way, as opposed to polyamory or polygamy or polyandry or just hookups or whatever.
They get twisted with
well, it's like in Japan.
Really,
in Japan, supposedly the women are okay with the men going out to these sex bars and stuff like this. The businessmen. However, there's a difference between what they will agree with upon a societal level and what they actually feel. So when these kind of things become known to a Japanese woman, she doesn't go, oh, I hope you have a good night going out with the boys to your brothel. No, she hardens up. She becomes more practical minded. She, in other words, oh yeah, this affects her regardless of the society. And I think that's the same for most of the changes that have happened. I think there's a difference between the reality of a thing, the morality of a thing, and the legitimacy of a thing, or the cultural norms. In every culture, there have been norms. For instance, in the Bible, it's pretty clear, if you look at Genesis, that it's one man, one woman. Somehow, by the time you get to Abraham or Solomon, where all these concubines and wives come in. But then by the time you get to Jesus, it's one man, one woman. So it takes a long time to sift through the cultural debris, which I'm sure was coming from all sorts of other cultures, and to sift them out and to finally get to the point. It took the Jewish race, 1,000 years or whatever it was, to get to that point. Just as when Paul in the New Testament says, there's no difference between male, female, slave, free, Jew, Gentile before God. It has taken years and years and years to get to the point where we kind of understand what he was talking about. And even then, obviously, then there are some people who've taken those ideas of equality way too far the other way.
Well, I actually see the ideas of equality not really existing at all, other than a self-serving discussion. Well, I believe the largest plague of all mankind right now, and the sin nature of mankind right now, even those within religious organizations, whether they see it themselves or not, is the creating of ourselves as gods. Like the self-idolatry, putting ourselves as we know, like this theological practice. Like, why is it that? Because all of these men and me, a man, all said that this has to be done. And so this is the right way. And we close ourselves off to the moving and living spirit, mm-hmm. and I honestly just think the whole mess of the whole world is the self-righteous nature of man.
Right.
Well, they believe they're self-righteous.
That goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, about the heart. And Owen Barfield said about equality, he says there's a big difference between political equality, where everyone before the law is equal, and identicality, which is where you have, two textbooks that you use for university, and they're both equal, except of course on a microscopic level they're not. But basically, for all intents and purposes, they're equal. But that is the kind of equality that the political movements of our day are looking for. They're looking for everyone to be the same. And there's no such thing.
It's like saying CNN, NBC, ABC. It's like saying they're all different networks when they're not. They're saying the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about?
No. I'm not talking about the media as much as I'm talking about the political ideology of equality or equity is probably a better word, that has sprung up where we all should be the same.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that, well, for one thing, that's impossible. And for another,
it's not healthy. It's not functionable.
Yeah, we need
mathematically non-functionable.
Yeah. I mean, I have no particular envy that I'm not in control of somebody's government.
Yeah.
I think there should be people who are. I will, respect them to the degree I can. But the point is, I'm not them. So fine.
Yeah.
That's okay. I don't have to be everything. I don't have to be equal to everybody. I can be lower than some people. I can be better than some people. It's okay.
Equity is really important to those who want to own and control everything, because they could say, yeah, all 98% of the rest of you have equity and I own everything. Yeah. Right? It's a control mechanism. And the equity argument in the modern day is nothing more than a control mechanism to take away free will from another being.
Right. Well, I've heard the phrase recently in a few places, commercial communism or something. That is to say that so much of this stuff is coming from this push towards equality is coming from commercial forces.
Yeah.
So, but that's, I think when you deal with certain aspects of the nature of humanity, those things are always there, which is why, in a sense, the people in Haynes are right for saying, okay, these things don't, shouldn't knock us down on a day-to-day level. That's one reason I like being in Georgia, is because people here have gone through stuff and they tend to not, it's just kind of like, okay, more stuff is coming. They know more difficulties will come. They tend to take it, it's just kind of like, okay, like this whole pandemic, I didn't see the kind of panic here that I saw coming from America or Canada or Australia. Or
the difference it sounds like is these people I'm talking about with the passivity of what's going on in our country are not saying, oh, it's coming, but rather in their lives they're are calling it. they don't understand they're calling it by their passivity, by their saying, no, this is right, that is wrong, and I will say it out loud with my mouth. And if everybody actually says it out loud with their mouths, there will be no one to follow orders to bring about these things. But we have a nation that it doesn't stand up and say it with their mouth. This is right, this is wrong. And by that passivity, they are allowing persecution. And so, and I'm not saying that they're different than me. I'm the most guilty freaking person in America. Okay. I'm not perfect, but I just so frustrating, and I'm always talking and not really responding to what you're saying because I freak out. Anyway, sorry about that.
It's okay.
But I hate the fact that I talk over you, Byrne, because I want to be a part of a conversation, but I'm so narcissistic. It's just, yeah.
You're getting good. You're getting good.
Yeah.
I think very few of the people who will be listening to that will be thinking much about that. So,
okay.
Well, look. I should probably get going here, and I really appreciate you taking your time. What time in the morning is it there?
Oh, I don't know. I get up between 3 and 4 a.m. every day.
Right.
I've been up forever. Yeah.
But there is a little sunlight right now, right?
Oh, it's out now. Yeah.
So you got to go enjoy it for a couple of hours.
Yeah. Yes. No, I'm probably gonna sit here and read my Bible in all honesty.
Okay.
Yeah. But
so have you read the book of Ecclesiastes recently?
Not recently, but I mean over many years of my life.
Yeah, I've
read it inside and out.
It's a good book, for today.
I'm not a scholar. I don't have a great memory, but I've read it.
So. That's okay. Have you ever watched Paul Vanderklay's channel?
I think I watched it once or twice around the time that he was on your channel.
Yeah. Well, he takes people and talks to them. And I would like him to talk to you sometime. He's a Dutch Calvinist minister, but he's American.
Crazy, Byrne.
Oh, no. You really should watch some of his conversations with people.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just say this. If you're watching this right now, and you're one of the people who know who Paul Vanderklay is, if you think Ashley should have a conversation with Paul, leave a message. That's all I'm going to say.
Goodness. Well, I mean, I love talking to people,
No, but I think you would have a very interesting conversation with him. He's a very good listener and talker. So,
well, maybe he'd edify me because I'm looking for encouragement in Christ, and I live alone. My prayers are like, send a witness here.
Yeah. No, I think you'd find him very interesting to talk to, and I think I'm not the only one who would think that. So anyway, I'm going to say farewell, or as we say here, I'm just going to say this: droabit, which means temporarily, just for a while. We'll be gone.
Droabit.
Yeah, and
okay.
So we will meet again, and I think also that let's think about getting you here. If you think Ashley should come to Georgia,
I'd be on a plane right now if I could, Byrne. The whole problem is you need to show your papers everywhere, and I've been here so long I don't have any papers. So.
And if not, right away I will see you in the hopefully by the end of the summer when I come to get my stuff.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, I don't want to, I'm becoming more, I don't know, debased before God, really. And so I don't want to make any bold statements of where I'll be, but if it were up to me, I'll be there soon.
Okay. Well, you know what? In God's time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Don't fret it. Just seek it. See what happens. So, okay, Ashley, good night from Georgia. Droabit,
okay.
Or Droabit, which is goodbye. And
good morning.
Yes, good morning from Alaska. Take care.
Well, here in America, we say see you later.
Yeah, or toodles.
No, we don't say that.
I do.
All right, I don't know how to hang up, so you're going to have to hang up on me.
I'm going to hang up.
So there you have it. Another conversation with Ashley. And if you like these conversations, let me know. Write something in the comment section. So hit like. The more people that hit like, the more this video will get suggested to other people. This and other videos on my channel, if you look at the numbers, I don't have the largest channel in the world. Not that I want the largest channel in the world, but I think there's room for a few more people, don't you? Subscribe if you haven't already, and you can support me through PayPal, and there is a link below for that. Well, from Tbilisi, or am I really in Prague? Or who knows, by the time you watch this, where I'll be. This is Byrne saying, remember, Anadromous means swimming against that stream. Do that.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.